For far too long, humans in the form of private individuals and organizations have been massively conducting an ecocide. Ecocide is an environmental genocide, which means that we are literally killing the environment. It sounds radical, but that's exactly what we do by carelessly consuming and polluting, even though we all know the state of emergency that we are in. Both individuals and companies continue to carelessly dump resources and throw them away when there's a clear option to repurpose. Proposition says that this is inherently a crime. Panels, let's be clear on our burden here. For Prop to win this debate, we have to explain why other alternatives and regulations have failed, and without this regulation of criminalizing parties who do not recycle, and without the collective action from all parties that result from this regulation, nature as we know it will be plunged one step deeper into its destruction. 2 points are set up to clarify inside Prop. On framing then. Firstly, all other attempts have failed, thus we need a new regulation. Because the current system of imposing fines on companies that do not recycle ultimately does no massive harm to them. Worst case scenario is that they can just pay these fines and they can move on, rather than having to altogether restructure in the way that their company handles these resources. With criminalizing these actions, companies would have a permanent track record where they are seen as violators of the law, which would drastically affect their image in the consumer's eyes. On an individual level, all we do is raise awareness in the current status quo. We don't actually impose real regulations that cost these individuals at a point in which they do not recycle. The only thing close to this was the ban on plastic bag, but that wasn't even effective because all you have to do is pay 500 rupiah to get these plastic bags. Second point, what do we mean by criminalizing and what are the consequences? We would criminalize them when they have the clear option to recycle and they do not. This looks like companies carelessly disposing of their waste in rivers or in wastelands when it is possible for them to recycle this waste. This looks like individuals dumping all of their trash in the garbage dumps when they can reuse the products that they actually consume. We would have parties in each district to actually ensure that the recycling is happening by these individuals and to monitor companies to see what they do with their waste. Third point on framing, why should not recycling be criminalized? We criminalize things that fall under two important categories. Firstly, that they have direct harms to society, and secondly, that they're a form of negligence. That is to say that you have the ability to actually help, but you actively choose not to because it's more convenient for you to be ignorant this way. Secondly, on our model then, we are going to make both individuals and corporations accountable for not recycling in different ways. So let's clarify it then. We criminalize actions like throwing away plastic bottles and bags when they can be recycled. Actions like companies not caring about their waste they put out as long as they rapidly manufacture products. This criminalizing involves having a permanent track record so that shareholders of companies and consumers are acutely aware of the reckless behavior of these corporations, and employers of individuals or anyone who might need their track record would see this appear on their criminal track record. So we would also have the compensation of actions in ways such as heavy fines and having to do community service if you don't recycle. Two arguments inside Prop then. Firstly, why is it just to actually criminalize this? And secondly, why would this change the party's incentives and behaviors in the long term? First argument then. Panels, look at the state of the current status quo. Endless amount of wastelands that stretch millions of miles, damaging aquatic life near companies that dispose toxic waste in these bodies of water. That is what's going to be worsened if we don't communally take action against the pollution of our world. We cannot let individuals get away with consuming products and taking no accountability for it, worsening the state of our world when they actually have the option to help. First analysis. Why is it just to criminalize this? Two sets of metrics in which this should constitute for a crime. Firstly, something should constitute for a crime when the harm on our society is disproportionate. Notice, panels, that this is a collective action problem, meaning that there is a domino effect that builds up from individuals and corporations when they refuse to recycle. It means that the impact of this is huge, that billions of people continue to not recycle. Why then is the harm disproportionate here? Because if the majority of people keep living in this ignorance, scientists predict that the world is literally going to be destroyed by 2050. Every single piece of plastic that we choose not to recycle, that we use for a day and decide to throw away, is going to remain on the earth for hundreds of years. Refusing to take accountability for your consumption when it so damages the world is obviously a crime. But second metric then, if it is a form of negligence and refusal to do their responsibility. When individuals or companies have the option to recycle and actively opt out of it, they're harming the world when it is that easy to take action. When we think that the problem with climate change is not necessarily that people find it a hassle to just use a recyclable tote bag or to pick up products with a recyclable symbol, but rather because they are negligent and they are careless. It's because they don't see the urgency in doing so because they face no direct consequences in their lives. This is exactly the problem. The point here is that it is within their capacity to recycle and to contribute positively, but they choose to ignore it because it's more comfortable for them. The conclusion here is clear. Simply not recycling causes such a huge harm to the world as we know it. So we need to stop allowing parties to be ignorant. They need to have a serious consequences for their actions, which constitute as inherent crimes. But second argument then, why would this change parties' incentives and behaviors in the long term? We can no longer run on the assumption that engineers in the future are going to solve this problem. The impact of climate change has caused the death of countless marine organisms, has even caused acid rain when this intoxicated water gets into the water cycle. If we allow people to keep being ignorant, to keep consuming and then just throwing things away recklessly, do not turn from their actions and change their lifestyle now, they are not the only party that's going to be harmed. Our world as we know it is being destroyed as a result of this negligence. We have to actually start preventing right now. Why then would our regulation actually change parties' incentives? First analysis then, because this track record is permanent. This would go onto their track records permanently. That is, if they choose to take this lightly, others around them that see their track record won't. It eventually will come back to them when consumers of companies prefer companies that show they actually recycle waste instead of ones that are criminalized for doing the opposite. When they have less shareholders because of this. It has repercussions on an individual level when their lives, on their lives as well, when they're asked to defend why they do not recycle, when the option is right in front of them, when they're seen as violators that cause harm to society simply because they refuse to make changes in their lifestyle. A criminal record would literally make it harder for companies to get loans in the future, for example, and it would affect the amount of trust that people put into individuals whenever they deal with these individuals. We put a massive price tag on not recycling, we give people a huge incentive to shy away from it. But second analysis then, that they will actually make changes into their lives and into the way that they deal with resources. In the past, shareholders have always been trying to maximize profit at the expense of the environment. It's easier to leave waste there and keep manufacturing. But when they're heavily fined and when this digs into their profits, they're forced to actually build a system where they recycle this waste. And people would actually want to keep recycling because others are doing it. It would create the opposite domino effect when others are recycling and you want to recycle too. Companies will be disadvantaged the moment that they choose not to recycle because their competitors do recycle and all of them flock to them because they don't have the track record. Conclusion here is clear. Because side proposition proves to you why not recycling is inherently a crime, and we cannot solve this urgent problem in the current status quo without making individuals accountable for their actions by a permanent criminal record, you must propose.